Where today we are going to see two games, and I think you will enjoy them because those games are very, very inspiring. The idea of these games is a little bit in continuation to what we did the previous week, and it has to do with taking advantage of better development and the initiative. The initiative is when we are calling the shots. We have the right to move, we have a push in the position, we have a chance to create another threat and try to get our opponent into trouble. And well, it works in those two games. Let's take a look at the first game. In the first game, you see that black is accepting a gambit. A gambit is when you sacrifice a little bit of material, and the price that he charges the opponent is a few tempi, a few moves. He's gaining in time. When his opponent gets a little greedy, as you will see, he gets punished. So, we have a normal e4 opening, Sicilian defense, knight f3, pawn to d6, and in this position, we know that there are many moves that are possible. d4 is the main line, striking at the center, pawn takes, knight to f6, and white is trying to play a little bit of a sideline. Normally, the move knight c3 comes like automatically. The knight was attacking the pawn, our knight is defending the pawn. That's very, very normal. So instead, he plays the move bishop to b5 check. Okay, so let's think about this move for a moment. What is going on? Of course, there's no time to take the pawn. The bishop is checking the king. The knight cannot come to his natural square on c6, because then I will just take, pawn takes, bishop takes, winning a pawn, and then I'm going to win a rook in the corner. So black has to make a choice between bishop d7 or knight d7. Some people like to keep our bishop for later. They think, hey, the bishop on b5 is going to be vulnerable. Maybe we can attack it later, play like a6, and then move our b pawn. But you can also play bishop d7. Knight d7 is our topic. Okay. Now white played the move castles. Of course, he could play the move knight c3, just defend the pawn in a normal way. But he says to his opponent, listen, free pawn for you. Take it. Take my pawn. I dare you to take it. At first, black thought about it and say, his king is already castled. My king is stuck in the center. Both sides have two developed pieces. If I take this pawn, and he's going to go rook e1 or something, what will happen to me? Let's check it out. He didn't dare do it. Let's see why. Because after takes, here, knight f6, knight f5 comes, and this is a monster position for white. Monstrous position. I'm threatening to play knight takes d6 checkmate. And even if you defend it with your queen, I'll still take it because my queen is behind. Notice how this rook is pinning this pawn all the way here. Bad news. So black has to give the pawn. At a minimum, he has to play e6. Then my knight will just take here. And you'll have to give me your good bishop. My queen will take. What can I say? This position is just wonderful for white. I get my material back. I have big development advantage. I have two bishops because I will win the bishop on f8 for my knight. Happy, happy, happy. So, okay, he decides, let me not take this pawn. Let me play the move g6 and develop my bishop. Okay, very well. So now black is more ready. He is ready to play bishop g7 and castle in two moves. White plays the move c4. Again, a very, very interesting move. The idea of this move has two different themes. One, he is still challenging the opponent to take the pawn. Very tempting, look like a free pawn in the center. And you'll see what black did. The other thing is, I want to play now knight to c3 and defend my stuff, but I really like the fact that I have two pawns on e4 and c4 because they make a very strong hold in the center. They make the move d5 or later on b5 very hard to execute. So we call this a Marozzi bind. Marozzi was a Hungarian player, a grandmaster, and he had this idea of playing this kind of a bind. It's like a belt, the e pawn and the c pawn to hold against any breaks by black. So black decided, I'm going to take your pawn. Well, maybe instead the variation should have been like bishop here, knight to c3, castles, and then white could play, well, either bishop g5 or bishop takes the knight on d7. Let's, for example, see this, bishop here, a6, takes, queen d2. This would just be a normal game. Material is even, and black is not too bad. I mean, he's kind of okay. White is probably going to bring his rooks to the center. Black is probably get his queen out and get his rooks. It would just be another game. However, in our game, after c4, he decides that he can no longer resist the pawn. He is very hungry for the pawn. He needed a snack, and that pawn was his afternoon snack. Now you will see that sometimes snacks are not so good for you. Look what happened now. Now it's where the game really begins. Up to here, both sides were developing kind of normally. We said that black should have played bishop g7, just ignore that pawn, but he couldn't resist it and he took it. So now white starts. The first move is rook e1, very easy to understand. What is the idea of this move? I'm attacking the knight, getting my rook on a very dangerous open file, right? And now the knight better go back. I don't think that black wants to play a move like f5 and defend the knight, especially when my knight can come and visit on this beautiful square. Guys, if you keep playing games, I'll have to separate you, so decide now. Either you separate or you behave. So he decides to play knight back to f6. Now we see that there's a slight difference. Before, there was a pawn back on g7, and this pawn was back on c2, and I could have just played knight f5 like I told you. Now I can no longer play it because this is here. But, all right, white is just saying, I'm not hungry to take my pawn back. I just want to show that I have so much play, so much more space and development for my pawn, that it's going to pay off later on. For now, we can see that white has two minor pieces developed, one of them in the center. Black has one knight developed here, which is kind of pinned, and the other knight that moved already several times here on f6. And it's white to move. Look how much space white has and how much space black has. In previous lecture, I've mentioned it. I don't know if you guys remember or not. How do we count for space? We pretend that we put an imaginary line right down the middle between the 4th and the 5th ranks, and we start counting points. Every one of our pieces that reaches beyond that mark or are there is going to get 1 point. So for example, we have a bishop that is beyond the halfway mark. That's 1 point. It's attacking here. That's 2, 3, 4. The knight hits 5, 6, 7, 8 with the pawn, 9 with the queen, 10, 11, 12 with the rook, 13, 14 with the bishop. How about black? He has 1, 2. Is that good news? No. That's not good news. But he has an extra pawn. He says, okay, if you don't do anything now, if you don't do anything that scares me, I'm going to go bishop g7, I'm going to castle, and then good luck looking for your pawn. I'm going to be up a pawn, completing my development with no problems. So white is to be a little ambitious here. Okay, he decides to play the move bishop f4. I have to tell you that when I was preparing this game for this class, I was also looking at it with the analysis engine, with the computer, and the computer played a move that I didn't think about. And I'm going to discuss it with you a little bit. Maybe even a better move than one played in the game, just to show you how dangerous it was to take that pawn. The computer says white should play knight c6. When I saw this move, I had to really give a double take. I had to twice look, really? Because this looks like, what? I don't even get the point. But when you take a close look, boy, do you get the point. So, queen c7. Taking the knight is out of the question. If you take the knight, I'm going to go bishop takes, attack the rook. If you move the rook, I'm going to go queen takes here. What a monstrous position. Not only is this pawn pinned, but because this knight is pinned, I want to take your rook. It's not protected. And if you even dream about protecting your rook or moving it, I'm going to take this knight. Because guess what? Both this pawn and this knight are pinned. So if you try to play, let's say, this move, I'm going to say thank you. Oops, not this thank you. I'm going to say thank you. What a disaster for black. Complete disaster. Okay, so you can't take the knight, but what if you just ignore it? What if after this you just, what if after this you just play here? Well, look at what white has here. Again, he has so much initiative, he has so much attack and so many beautiful squares, he can afford to give everything. Watch the sacrifices. I already gave up a pawn, and watch what I'm going to do now. Bam! Knight takes e7. Well, you better take it. If you don't take it with the bishop, my knight is going to move somewhere like to d5, and I'm going to win the house. So you got to take, and then bishop g5, developing the bishop for free. Now I just want to take the knight on f6. Thank you very much. Because it's pinned twice. It looks like it's defended twice, but it isn't. the bishop is pinned to the rook, and the knight is pinned to the bishop. So after this, you have to move your king. And now, another brave move by white. Rook takes e7. This is just a crazy game where you can give so much material. You're going to be down a rook, but man, the black king is going to not find any relief. So here, knight c3, threatening a very big check on d5, forking the king and the queen. Once again, notice the pin here. Everything is pinned. He is stuck. And if you try to run away, let's say by king f8, I will play bishop takes d7. Now the knight on f6 is not protected. So let's say you protect it by recapturing. Knight d5 attacking the queen. The poor queen has to go somewhere. Let's pretend here. Check. Now where are you going to go? If you go to g8, knight e7 is mate. Just checkmate. So you have to go this way. Then we go queen to g4. What a nice little move. Again, I don't expect you to see all this in your own games, but just to appreciate how when all the development is out, like when you have two rooks in the corners doing nothing, okay, then it doesn't mean your upper rook, it's almost like you down a rook, because you have no defensive pieces whatsoever. And then the rest of my pieces can just cause lots of trouble. Now, you have basically no defense against me coming on the dark squares. You are really missing your dark square bishop. So let's say, for example, knight e5, attacking the queen 2 times. Queen g5. How are you going to defend against the checkmate on e7? Which of your pieces can even defend? There's only one move. Arjun, you want to say it? The only move. But then, surprise, knight f6 check, and what happens to the queen? Bye-bye. That's right, bye-bye is the correct term. So wow, this is really, really scary. Knight c6, imagine if you would have played knight c6, this game would have been a real brilliancy. It looks like a funny move. What happens if you take it? You can't. If you don't take it, you're still stuck. Okay, white played another good move, bishop f4. Also a very fun move. He is threatening to take the pawn on d6. Everybody can see that. So there's no time to develop the bishop. If you just develop the bishop, I'm going to take this pawn, not only getting my pawn back, but I'm all over the e7 pawn. Black can just say bye-bye again. So he has several choices, and let's analyze some of them. In the game, he went a6. That was a bad move. He has no time to spend by attacking my bishop because I'm not going to move it. Instead, he should have played e6 or e5. Let's take a look at the lines. So let's say, for example, if e5, knight c3, the best move. Again, the pawn is pinned, so even though you fork my pieces, you can't do anything. Bishop g7. And now I have two choices. I can take the knight on d7, or I can just simply play bishop here, knight here, and the pawn on d6 is going to fall. Very bad pawn. You see the arrow? It just shows that the queen eventually is going to win the pawn on c7. And black is going to have a cramped position. But black he had to have done that. He had to have tried that, excuse me. Because when he didn't, watch what happened. He played a6. Now he is in real trouble. White simply said, I'm not going to bother move the bishop. I can give you a piece, because watch what happens. Bishop takes pawn d6. A sacrifice of a piece. Now, I don't like it when you just give away pieces in your games like it's Christmas, because sometimes you just give them away and there's no follow-up. Please close the door. Thank you. But in this position, with the king stuck in the center, I really want you to pay close attention. How would you know when you can afford to sacrifice a piece? How would you know? Here it is. The king is stuck in the center with no moves. You have 4 pieces that haven't left yet, a 5th one if we include your queen. This knight is pinned. This knight is kind of helpless. And my king on g1, he's not even a part of the game. He's just resting there. You can't touch me. You can't check me. The difference between the two kings just tells the story. Even if I end up losing my bishop, I'm going to have so many other pieces to attack with that you have no hope. So he decided to take. Well, maybe he shouldn't have taken the bishop, but what else? I already got my pawn back, and you can't move the bishop from f8. Miserable. Really, really miserable. He decides to say, okay, if I have to suffer, let me at least try to win a piece. But it's not going to work. Takes, knight takes. Boy, am I threatening some annoying stuff now. I want to play bishop c7, trapping the queen, and I want to play knight c7 check, also forcing you to give me your queen. Terrible. Really, what to do? So he tried to get the queen out by playing queen to b6. Now bishop c7, it looks like the queen is going to run away. But it's not so simple. So some of you might say, hey, what happened if I go knight check, king d8, knight takes rook? Well, then the queen is going to attack the knight this way or this way, and both the knight and the bishop are attacked. Don't forget, you already lost a piece. You gave up a piece on b5. So white says, you know what? I don't even want your rook. And again, I want you to learn something from this game. What is it? When you have a good move, stop for a moment and see if you have a yet better one. In this position, the rook looks really juicy, but why take a rook when you can win even more? Watch what he did. Bishop to c7. What a fun move to make. Not only is he attacking the queen with a tempo, but if the queen goes too far away, knight d6 is going to be checkmate. What to do now? Knight d6 is coming regardless. If I get to play knight d6, you're going to have to sack a queen for a knight. So he said, okay, damage control. I know that I lost, I'm going to lose something, but I already up a piece. Let me give up my rook for a queen, my queen for a rook, excuse me, and maybe I can still fight on. And he played the move, queen to e6. What a sad move to have to make. He has to say, okay, here, take my queen. Take it. I have to unpin the e-pawn. The idea is that now if knight d6, the pawn just takes it, and you just lost a knight for no reason. So, of course, white can be really annoying and just move this bishop away, saying, I'm not even going to bother to take your queen, I'm going to threaten knight c7 check. But he figured out, you know, let's be practical. Rook takes queen, pawn takes, bishop back to f4, threatening knight c7 check, king f7, moving the queen away, the king away, and after knight c7, he said, you know what, enough. You're attacking my rook. I don't have many good squares to go with the rook. When I move my rook, queen e2 is going to come, and the pawn on e6 is probably going to fall. The position is just very, very miserable, and he decided enough is enough, and he resigned. Now, in your games, I don't want you to resign. I want you to play all the way to mate, make your opponent prove that they can beat you. But when you play at the grandmaster level, they respect each other. They know that there's no chance that white is going to have an accident in this position, and he gave up. Although I have to tell you, there's a tournament going on in Holland right now, and one guy was up a queen for 2 pieces, and he made a draw. He couldn't win. He found it very difficult to win, and this is top of the line grandmaster, because his king was in a little bit of trouble, could never get it out. So, did we understand this game? Great. Now, game number 2. And let's take a look at what's happening in this game. Again, a great example of somebody playing very powerful chess. The player with the white pieces, I've talked about it several times this week and then the previous week. Somehow it's really coincidental because I wasn't really searching his games, just looking at material. And he was one of the best players in the world. His opponent is also a pretty well-known opponent. Watch what happened. Watch what white does to black here. e4, c5, knight f3, knight f6. A very strange side variation. Normally, black plays moves like e6, d6, or knight c6, sometimes even g6. But this move is really not that common. Mainly because white can immediately chase the knight, and when the knight comes to the center, where else he's not going to go backwards, then he is challenging him with this knight. He is hoping that after knight takes knight, pawn takes, the queen is ready to come out, the other bishop is ready to come out, this bishop is ready to come out. White enjoys a lot more space for his double pawns. So, e6, again inviting him to take, so he has 2 pawns in the center, and he does. Why? Because he doubles the pawns. Takes, d4. Now black has to be really, really careful. He can't just take on d4 with no reason, because he's going to end up with 2 isolated double pawns, and whichever white piece is going to be on d4 is going to be sitting there forever. You will never have pawns on the nearby files to kick it out. So the most common move here I can tell you is knight c6, developing. He decides to play the move d6. It's also possible, but it's a little bit risky. Why? Because white is going to move forward much faster, and the black king has to be careful not to get stuck in the center. Watch what happened in this game. So, in this position he plays bishop g5, developing with a tempo. I'm attacking the queen, and very, very risky position because now the queen has to move. If you try to, let's say, block with your bishop, I will take it. Then I will take here. And the pawn on d5, notice how it's marked with a green square. I'm going to get for free pawn, freebie. Not good. So he said, okay, I'll move my queen. I'll be patient. Do you have a question?
Could you move your queen to a5?
Say one more time.
Could you move your queen to a5 or would that not help?
Well, it depends. In the game, he decided to play queen a5.
Oh.
So, yeah. I mean, other moves would have been queen b6 maybe, but I think that queen a5 trying to gain the tempo is more important. So he gave a check, and of course white blocked in the simplest way that he can. And now he decides to take the pawn on d4. Okay, I think that this is a very sensible move. What is the idea? If you take with the knight, I'm going to play pawn takes pawn, winning a pawn and attacking a knight. If you take with the queen, I'm going to play knight c6 again with a gain of tempo, with a gain of time, attacking this and this. So white says, let's take a look at this position. I'm very developed. I have two minor pieces out, my bishop on g5, my knight on f3. I also have a very strong pawn on e5. Very strong pawn. But I cannot yet castle. I have a bishop on f1. If not for my bishop on f1, I could castle. So he thought, yes, I just lost a pawn, and he can take even another pawn, maybe even another pawn. He can take a lot of pawns. But I think it's worth it. I think it's a good deal for me because all my pieces are going to be very active and he's just going to keep taking pawns. Look how many pieces he has back on the first rank. 1, 2, 3, the king, 4, 5. So he decided to play bishop d3. Sometimes it's really smart to let your opponent take your stuff because look at the freebies. Already he develops a bishop for free. Then he's going to castle. You can't stop me from castling. So he decides to take another pawn. So far it's okay. I think that this is a reasonable move. And do you think white took back? Nope. Simply castled. He just says, hey, you can have all my pawns. For every pawn you take, I get another free move towards the attack. Now it was really high time for black to stop and think. Because dude, all your pieces are back home. Look at mine. I have all my minor pieces, all the three minor pieces active on pretty good squares. I am castled. My king is safe. What about yours? He's like in the middle of a draft. There's a big wind flowing, and guess what? Your king is right there. And my rook is about to come to the e-file. When that happens, your king is really going to be scratching his head where he's going to go. So this was a high time to start defending. He needed to play the move. This was very dangerous. He needed to play the move bishop to e6. Still, white would have some initiative here. I can just get my pawn back here. And it's very risky to take because my rook is going to come to the file. And then it'll be a game. White will have a little bit downwind material, but he has a lot of activity. But taking here was just too much. That is almost a rude move. That's, come on, how many pawns are you going to take and not take care of your king? So white said, okay, rook b1. So let's count the material. White has 5 pawns. How many does black have? All of his pawns. He has 8. White is now down 3 pawns, but it's not as simple as that. All my pieces are developed. My king is castled. When I take this pawn, I'm causing some trouble on this file as well. Black is in trouble. Taking the pawn on b2 was a real bad deal. So he decides to play the move d takes e5. Let's take a look at another possibility. Let's say he would have developed his knight. Then rook e1. Uh-oh, I'm about to go pawn takes pawn check. Bishop e6 trying to block the file. Rook takes b2, winning 1 pawn, and I'm about to visit on the b7 square. Queen c7 going back to defend it. Queen b1, what a beautiful little move. The queen from a distance does all kind of damage. I'm doubly attacking the pawn on b7, and my bishop and queen are also attacking this pawn for later on. So, rook b8, rook c1, and I have a huge threat. Rook takes knight. Why is that a huge threat? If you take with a pawn, bye-bye rook. I have 2 guys on that. If you take with a queen, bishop b5, pinning and winning. Is black having fun in this position?
Yes.
I don't think so. He has to try, but at the right time. Because if you don't play bishop, right now bishop e7 doesn't work because I take on c6. But if you try to do it before, like let's say in this position, I will take the b7 pawn. If you did it in this position, I will just take the b7 pawn. I'll take the bishop on e7 and you will lose everything. Not good. So he tries pawn takes here, knight takes e5, and he plays the move bishop to d6. Again, I don't think this was the best move, and you will see how white punished it. But again, just to show an example of how much attack white already has, let's take a look at the variation. If you would have played this move, then I take. One more time, I took one of the extra pawns, and I'm ready to take on b7. If you try to say, forget about the b7 pawn and go here, I'm just going to take it. If you take my knight, I'm going to go bishop check. What an attack on the king. Just a terrible attack. Knight d7, queen takes d5. Is that a beautiful move or not? I think it's a tremendous move. If bishop takes queen, bishop takes knight on d7 is what? Finally, somebody said it. I thought you guys fell asleep on me. Yes, if you take my queen, bishop takes d7 is mate. Game over. So, wow. All right, we understand that black already was in trouble, but this move is not going to save him. Now, let's see if you can think how white came about his next move. He says to himself, okay, so now black is developing his pieces. A, he's attacking my knight. B, even more importantly, he's about to castle. So he wants to combine both ideas. He wants to castle, and he's also attacking my knight. What am I going to do? And white said, well, I think I have so many open lines and diagonals and files and attacking pieces that I can give my knight so I can A, don't just lose it, and B, forget about castling for black forever. Watch what he did. Knight takes f7. What a brilliant sacrifice. Really a very smart way to give up a piece. Normally I frown when you just give pieces for no reason, but here time is even more important than the material. And getting the king exposed, the black king is exposed, game over. Let's take a look what happened after knight takes. Well, if you don't take, then good luck, because I'm attacking your rook in the corner, and I'm attacking your bishop here with check. You want to lose everything? Be my guest. So you could castle and just lose the bishop. That doesn't look very appealing. So he decided to accept the sacrifice. Now white brings his queen with power. Check. And now black says, okay, maybe it's time to give away a little material back, because if not, I'm going to just fall apart. Let's take a look at the ideas. In the game, he went g6. If he would have played, for example, king up, then he's going to be completely massacred. So let's say he hides, then check here, and I can play bishop e7, or I can play queen takes c8. Either one of them just wins the game. I just win everything back. Poor black king. So in the game, he went g6, trying to save his king, and white said, okay, I can win material, let me do it, because your king is still going to be exposed. Bam, check. After takes, takes. So white managed to win a rook and a pawn for his bishop. Of course, he sacrificed the knight before. But again, if you had to say, what is the most important thing? Like if you look away from the board, pretend you've never seen it before, then look back at it. What is the most striking feature? What is the most thing the first thing to notice? The most noticeable thing in the board, what is it? Yes?
Your king is bouncing.
The black king on f7 is having a really bad hair day, right? He is really in trouble. He has no pawns sheltering him. The pieces are not organized to defend him, and the white pieces are just all over it. Too many open files and too many open diagonals. That didn't last long. In the game, he played bishop f5. Okay, any other move would not have helped either. I can tell you he's already in trouble. After here, white played rook e1. Another very nice little move. It says, oh, wow, the bishop is attacking the rook on b1. Should I just move it? Should I do something? Answer, no. The king is just going to be in deep trouble. Now I just want to play queen e8 check. Complete catastrophe. So he plays bishop e4. That was the idea of bishop f5. Try to block the file. And again, white has a million good moves. I can go, for example, queen f6 check and take the bishop. That's already nice. But white decides to be really flashy. He plays rook takes bishop. The last defender goes bye-bye. Pawn takes, check. Now, again, you'll notice that any move is going to lose. If you go, for example, king to e8, I'm going to go check. If you block with the bishop, I'm going to take it with mate. If you go to the only other legal square, mate. Very easy. So he decided to go the other way. Now we go check. Again, if you go to the corner, bishop f6 is mate. So he had to come out again. Queen takes bishop, check. How many of you think that the black king is going to escape this massive attack? Anybody think that black is going to survive? Really? Don't put your money on it, sir. No, no, no. The queen and the bishop against the lone king. Bad news. King f7. Queen f6 check. And now, king e8 is just checkmate here. So he goes this way. Queen check. Notice that the queen is playing on the light squares, the bishop on the dark squares. King g7. Bishop f6. Too much of an attack. Now, again, if king h7, then it's going to be mate. I'm just going to play, let's see it. Check, check. Looks like mate. That's how the game ended, by the way. And if instead he would have played king h6, bishop check, king here, check, king here, check, king here, bishop check, king here. And now, again, many moves, f4 or h4. You could also play the move h4. That's also mate very, very quickly. After king, I don't even know what to suggest. It's just totally over. The king is getting mated. Bad news. So again, we saw two examples of taking the initiative quickly, not being afraid to give a little bit of material at first, and once you have all your pieces active, in order to not allow the opponent to run away and castle, or organize a defense, or complete his development, we can give more material. Sometimes it'll be an exchange, a rook for a minor piece. Sometimes it's going to be a minor piece like a bishop and a knight, and sometimes it's going to be even a rook or your queen. It's all worth it if the final destination of your opponent's king is out of the board. Checkmate.